Hi, I'm Greg Dell with Dell Disability Lawyers, here with attorney Alexander Palamara. And Alex, today we're going to discuss an issue we've been seeing a lot lately, which deals with Unum denying disability benefit claims without examining the claimant. And it's not necessarily a new thing, but it's just coming up so much, and it's coming up on particular cases where you and I keep saying to each other, how can they get away with this? Can they keep doing this? And we keep fighting the battle, but a lot of people out there aren't necessarily aware of this, so it makes it even more important to do things in your appeals or during the handling of your claim to try to avoid this particular situation. So the first thing is can Unum legally deny disability claims without ever examining the claimant?
Yes, it's a good question, and can they legally do it? I guess the answer is yes. It all comes down to whether a reviewing judge thinks it's reasonable what they did there. But it's very troubling, and I think I see it more than ever. I think maybe COVID is an excuse because during the COVID years, maybe they did independent medical examinations more so before COVID, and then when the COVID years came out, they couldn't send anybody to a doctor for a couple of years, or at least for 2 years for the most part. And I think they continue to use that as an excuse, maybe in the back of their mind, saying, "Oh, we don't need to do an IME. We can just do these paper reviews." And it's been enough to justify these denials, and it hasn't been enough. We haven't been losing a lot of court cases to change our new way of thinking. So I think they're relying upon them too much, and it's unfair to the claimants because these paper reviews for
I want to cut you off 1 second because I think we started a little bit too high level, making the assumptions that people even know what a paper review is. So. So take it back one step and say, what are these paper reviews? How does Unum usually review a file when evaluating a person's eligibility for benefits?
So what you're going to see is what they do is the claimant will submit all of their medical documentation, or the doctors are going to submit all the medical documentation to support their claim for benefits. And what the first thing Unum does typically is they use an in-house doctor, either a medical director that works there or just a doctor they hire that's retired to perform a paper review. What I call a paper review is that all they're doing is looking at these medical records that you're submitting to them, and they're supposedly looking at all the records and generating an opinion whether the person should qualify for disability benefits or not. So they're not going out and actually speaking with this claimant. They're not going out and speaking with the claimant's doctors. They're just doing a paper review. They're looking at the papers. It's as simple a review as they can possibly do, and it's the cheapest review they can possibly do. So they do it twofold. Sometimes they do it in-house, like I said, which costs them nothing, just the salary of their employee, which they spread it out over the course of the year. The person's probably getting, break it down to it, probably maybe $100 per review. Or they go out and find an independent consultant review, and this independent consultant, yes, technically does not work for Unum, but these doctors often do these reviews, over and over again. They're almost employees, pseudo-employees of Unum. So they're doing these paper reviews, and they use it as justification to deny these cases. And it's so simple for them, and it's so quick and easy for them that they're just relying upon it too often. I see it more often than not nowadays. They don't even do independent medical examinations in person. They don't even do sending the people. I can't remember the last time I saw Unum send somebody to their own functional capacity evaluation. They're just getting, in my opinion, lazier and lazier in denying these cases.
So the claimants are required to go see a doctor and get treatment. And so the reverse of that is if a claimant says, I just called my doctor, I told my doctor what's going on with me, and the doctor wrote everything down, would Unum accept that and approve the claim?
They would laugh at it. If you said, I never saw my doctor once, I'm just calling my doctor with these complaints, and the doctor says, yeah, I'm putting them down in your records, use these records to apply for disability benefits, Unum would laugh you out of your claim and deny your case immediately, and probably even a reviewing court would probably rule against you as well. But to prove your point, it's just crazy to me that Unum thinks they can rely upon that to deny these people's claims. It's just unfair. I mean, I know a lot of these ERISA cases are unfair to begin with. A lot of the laws are just favorable to the insurance company than to the insured. They favor the insurance company more than they favor the insured. But it's just, you would think they'd be laughed out of court, but they're not, unfortunately.
So Unum, you mentioned something called an IME, which is an independent medical exam, although it's really what should be called a compulsory medical exam, which means you have to go, or Unum can say that you're in breach of a condition of your disability plan, and because of that alone, you didn't comply with the terms and we're not going to pay your benefits. But a lot of those Unum letters that they send, even people who are on claim, they always like to put in their letters, we have the right to have you examined at our expense, yet they rarely ever do that. When you say you rarely ever see them, why do you think they rarely want to examine the claimants, physically have them examined?
Well, seeing a disabled person in person could be detrimental to their goal of denying the case. You know, it's hard. You know what? I'm gonna back that up a little bit, because when they do IME, sometimes they send them to these doctors who only see them for 3 minutes. So I think they're being lazy, and I think they're saving in cost, to be quite frank with you. But also, it's harder to deny somebody when they see someone who's really disabled in person, because you know, a doctor really has to put their head in the sand sometimes to give an opinion that's unfavorable. But they do it, and it's crazy, and they do it by only spending 2 or 3 minutes with these people. Maybe they have their assistants perform, the pre-examination, conversation and whatnot.
Right.
And the doctor's in there for 2 or 3 minutes, and he claims to have reviewed the records. And I actually had a doctor go to my client and said, "They sent me thousands of pages. There's no way I can there's no way I can review all that. Tell me what's going on." So it's like these doctors they're busy doctors if they're actually practicing doctors, and they're only spending 2 or 3 minutes. So it's a farce. So even if they do the IME, sometimes it's a farce, but they should do it more often than not, because it's harder to deny a claim when they actually see somebody and look eye to eye and see what they're going through, and listen to their complaints, looking at their medical records. So that's probably the reason why they're shying away from it, and they know they can get away from it sometimes. But we're doing our best to hold their feet to the fire and stop them from doing this, or stop them from getting away from doing these IMEs.
Right. I think that certainly people who have appeals should ask for these, especially if they truly believe that another doctor is going to see some kind of physical manifestation of what they're having, or judge them, look them eye to eye. I mean, when people are, say, for example, even hiring someone in an interview, it's one thing to look at their resume. Why do we do in-person interviews? We want to see the person. We want to see who's behind the paper. But Unum doesn't want to see who's behind the paper. We just had a case that you did an appeal on, and I thought it was a great appeal. It was, everything that you could do, and we'll talk about it in a minute. And yet in this appeal, it was the perfect kind of case where Unum used their paper, and we're going to end up in litigation with this particular thing. But I wanted to use it as an example to show, because I think it's an extreme example of Unum, again, saying there's subjective complaints here, but just looking at the paper and kind of saying, yeah, we probably could get a better picture of this person if we did a physical exam, but we're not going to. We're just going to do paper. So just talk briefly about this particular case that, it's hot off, because we talk about a lot of our cases and file hundreds of lawsuits every year, or denial claims we deal with Unum. But what about this one really rubbed you the wrong way?
Well, one thing I have to point out, in my appeal, I said my client is open and available to go to an independent medical examination whenever you guys are ready. And I was clear in bold letters saying he's ready to see any of your doctors that you choose to see. Did they do it? No. But what did we do prior to filing that appeal is that we sent our client to an updated neuropsychological evaluation. We sent our client to an independent medical examination. We sent our client's files to our own independent physician reviewers, the way that Unum does it as well. Actually, I had 2 physician reviewers do a review of these medical records, and I had a vocational consultant do a review of his vocational requirements of his occupation, and applying his symptoms, his conditions, his diagnosis, and rendering a decision whether he believes this person has the ability to perform the duties of their own occupation. The 3 treating providers that were treating my client still are treating my client. The 2 independent consultants, the IME doctor and the vocational consultant, all had one thing in common. They all supported the contention that my client was unable to perform the duties of his own occupation. In response, Unum had a psychiatrist perform a review of the medical records, performing another one of those paper reviews, and then a neurologist perform a review of these records. These doctors never saw my client, never spoke to my client, weren't even able to speak to my client's treating providers, and they came up with the opinion that was different, 180% different, or 360 degrees different.
Completely opposite.
180 degrees different, completely opposite of of the treating providers and of the independent consultants as well, which is ridiculous. And my client's claim is part mental health. Mental health is unique because, like you said, you use the word subjective. Most mental health claims are subjective in and of the...
Right, depression, anxiety.
There's no MRIs, there's no x-ray to show, oh, he has depression. I can see it in his brain. The only way you can diagnose a mental health claim for the most part is by spending time with, speaking with, evaluating a person over a long period of time. An IME, even though it could be limited to 2 or 3 minutes, it should be a half hour, an hour, 2 hours. A person can get a good assessment whether a person really has subjective complaints that should be listened to by the insurance company or by the treating providers. And these insurance companies know that there's no objective evidence for a mental health claim, and they still rely upon these paper reviews. And what these paper reviews are actually doing, I like to call it a Monday morning quarterback. Because you have a treating provider, a psychologist, who's supportive of the contention that my client's disabled, who's writing records. Mind you, they're not writing records to prove to an insurance company doctor in an ivory tower that this person's disabled. They're writing records to treat the patient. So that when the patient comes back next time, where did we leave off? What's going on? They're just documenting their findings. But they're not documenting to prove disability. But the insurance company's independent paper reviewers are just reviewing these records as a Monday morning quarterback and saying, you know what, even though this guy is supportive of the contention that this person's disabled, I'm going to disagree here based on his records. And is that logical? Gosh, no, it's not logical. It's ridiculous that the insurance companies are doing this, especially on mental health claims, and especially in this claim as well. I think we're going to win this lawsuit. I can't ever guarantee when claims are governed by ERISA, but I like this lawsuit a lot.
Well, it's just a sad another example. We like to, advise people of what's going on out there, and then really we did everything possible, and unfortunately Unum's going to keep, they run their train across the tracks and it's not stopping no matter what's in its way, and you can beat them up so many times and they don't change their conduct often, and this case is another example where we're likely going to make positive case law for claimants where it's going to say, look, in this fact pattern that you should at least be going out and examining the claimant. So even here, when you had, the claimant had strong representation, and we're basically like, look, examine the claimant. You need to see him in this. And, we met with him earlier this week and spent 60 seconds with him, and he couldn't even get his thoughts together. And right away, it's like, yeah, this is a person supposed to be, you didn't mention it, but he was a software engineer who's going to sit and process and do things that other projects, other people are relying upon. And yet he can barely get his thoughts together for a 60-second conversation. I mean, any doctor who sat with him for 60 seconds even would know, yeah, this person doesn't have what it takes to do processing for 40 hours a week.
Right. I mean, I'm not a neuropsychologist, but I could tell just by speaking with him that he had issues with processing information, speed processing. He took time to reply to us or understand what our thoughts were, what we're trying to convey to him. It was pretty clear just by speaking with him, and I'm not even a trained neuropsychologist. So,
well, I know you and I and our team will do whatever we can to fight for him. And we always do these videos to help people, to give them advice, to help them with their cases, also to let them know that we're here to battle for them at any level, whether it's an appeal or lawsuit. So if you're someone out there with a Unum claim, no matter what stage you're at your claim, feel free to call Alex or myself. No matter where you live in the country, we will always provide you with a free phone consultation.